The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon to our listening audience. Thank you for joining us today. If you're here for our graduate student webinar on navigating UCEA convention, you have come to the right place. We are super fortunate today to have an incredible panel. We have Dr. Holly Mackey, Associate Co-Director of the Jackson Scholars Network. She's also a JSN mentor from North Dakota State University. And we have Dr. Christina Hesvel, who is also a Jackson Scholars Network mentor from the University of Denver. And now I'm going to be quiet and pass this on to them.
Thanks, Danny. We appreciate such a kind introduction. And just for those of you who are tuned in, please know that if you did not get questions sent over to Danny in advance for the question answer time, you can type in the comment box any questions you might have, and Danny will collate those together and we'll get to them at the end. We left time for questions, particularly for those who have never been or for those who might not have had the most stellar experience when they were at UCEA last year or the year before. So again, Dr. Christina Hesvel did agree to do this webinar with me. We've done this last year. We had done this last year, which was really the reason why we started doing the monthly webinar series to begin with, because it's a way for graduate students to connect with different faculty who lead them and get really important information throughout the year, where they're not simply relying on their mentors or their universities for that information. And then secondarily, it's a space where you can ask questions that you've not had time to ask, or perhaps you didn't think to ask. And we can either answer those questions for you, or if there are more structural questions about graduate student opportunities, we can connect you with the people that you need to be connected with. So today, general overview. So if you've been to UCEA, you might know some of this information, or it might be new to you. So we wanted to start with really preparing for UCEA, things that you can do in advance to make sure that you make the most of your time. And then we're going to talk about the different types of sessions and presentations. So when you're going through the program, you have a better understanding of the expectation there. More importantly, we're also going to talk about some etiquette and, if you are in one of those sessions, how to make sure that you're building good relationships through presenting your work. Next, we wanted to talk about just connecting and collaborating and thinking about networks and what collaboration means and what it can do for you, and when to collaborate, and perhaps knowing your limits on when you're not available for collaboration. And then very specifically talking about mentor-mentee relationships, not just Jackson Scholars, not just formal mentoring relationships, but the different ways that we encourage mentorship and the different ways that you can connect with people. Then we have some other considerations, which are just kind of some FAQ etiquette things as well, and then we'll have time for questions. Danny, go ahead and go to the next slide.
You're all set?
Okay, so preparing for UCEA is something that a lot of first-time students don't think about, or even if you've been there before, you might not have thought about the best way to prepare to get what you need out of the conference. And so a couple of things that we have encouraged students to do is really practicing your elevator speech and having business cards. Because everybody is very, very busy at UCEA and going in many directions. And the best way to connect with people is to be able to get out what you need to get out quickly, and then you can set up a time perhaps to meet later, or you can email them. But many students do not bring business cards, and then they wish they had. So even if you have to go down to like FedEx printing or print shop and have some generic cards made up, you can do that, or see if you can get them made through your department, so it has that information on there. But ideally, what you want to be able to do is connect with people and be able to talk about what you're studying in concrete terms, right? So not world peace necessarily. You have to identify something specific, and then thinking about what you still want to know and what your future plans are. And if you know how you want to impact the field, and you know what you're studying, and you know the direction you're going in, it will make it much easier for you when you're thinking about different faculty you want to connect with, or different students who you might develop networks with who are working in the same direction. They can be very, very strong connections. I know we've got the group that came out of 2010. We're all still very close because we thought about these things and were encouraged to do these things as we prepared for UCEA. So it's good to have a team, right? And then making sure that you review the schedule and the program in advance is something that we also highly recommend. And then mark out what is mandatory for you. So for example, if you're a Jackson Scholar, we have the welcome session, and we have a couple of speakers there. And we have the Julie Lively session that is not mandatory for all, it's for the first years. And then we have the recognition ceremony. And those are all mandatory sessions if you're a Jackson Scholar. You might be involved with different SIGs through AERA that made at UCEA, or different sessions that you are also required to. So I always encourage students to build their calendar and plug in everything mandatory first. And then you can start to think about who you want to see. So if there's somebody's work that you use a lot, or if somebody has told you that you should look up a particular scholar, you can go to the index and you can see when those people are presenting or where you might run into them. I know great advice from Dana Mitra from years ago when she was telling everybody how to prepare for AERA was to find out what room they're going to be coming out of, and perhaps if you can see where they're going. It's often a good time to just fall in step and talk with people because a lot of times nobody will be able to just stop right there and meet up with you. And then if there are other people that you want to meet, right, email them in advance to set that up. And I always encourage students to try to meet in pairs or small groups with some of the more heavily scheduled faculty. Or, for instance, if you want to get on, Monica Berna-Jimenez's schedule, she is really required to be at almost everything as an executive director. So if you email her in advance and try to set something up, and several of you want to meet with her, perhaps, to understand her vision for UCEA, for example, or whatever it might be. There's just some faculty who are extremely heavily scheduled. I'm also one of those faculty where we have the CSLEE conference that goes on Wednesday night and all day Thursday in conjunction with UCEA. And on Thursday, I have Graduate Student Summit, Jackson Scholars, and the CSLEE all running concurrently. So if you wanted to meet with me at the beginning of a conference, if you're only coming in for a few days, you'd have to get a hold of me in advance. Whereas a lot of times people fly out Saturday if they're not attending the banquet, things like that. So it's good to coordinate with your graduate student posse group and figure out who y'all want to meet and set that up in advance, particularly if you know that person's going to be busy. Go ahead, Danny.
So thanks, Holly. This is Christina Hespel from the University of Denver. And thanks for opening the webinar for us, to both Danny and Dr. Mackey. UCEA for a first time can seem pretty overwhelming. And so we're delighted that you could join us this morning just to get some overviews from people who have done it for a while and get some thoughts that maybe hadn't crossed your mind before. So the suggestions that you've heard so far from Dr. Mackey make so much sense. The notion of business cards I can't emphasize enough, because as you talk with someone, you're going to want to give them your business card, get a business card back, and then you're going to want to write a note to yourself on the back of their business card about what you talked about, so you can follow up with it. You can put Jackson Scholar on your business card, and I caution you to make sure that you know the difference between being a doctoral student and a doctoral candidate. So until you've successfully passed your proposal hearing, you're a doctoral student, and then once you've passed your proposal hearing, you are a doctoral candidate. So an overview of the options that you have at UCEA, and there's so many of them. JSN, as you know, is the Jackson Scholar Network, and the GSC, the Graduate Student Council presentations. They have Ignite and paper and roundtable sessions. The general session, there you'll see so many different options, including critical conversations. We're going to talk about these specifically in just a minute, and symposia as well. There also are keynotes that are given by people that you study in town hall sessions and workshops as well. The graduate student reception is a really important place for you to be to network with each other as well as with faculty. The awards luncheon is sort of a who's who. It happens at the opening of the conference, and you'll see the people who are being celebrated for their contributions to the field. And there are undoubtedly people that you read as well. The graduate student social networking event is an important one. And the opening reception is a place that you can, you'll know that other people feel a little awkward and trying to kind of find their way around. And you'll develop some networks there. The UCEA banquet on Saturday is great fun. And after a pretty exhausting couple of days, an energizing couple of days, the banquet is a wonderful celebration. This year it's a masquerade ball, actually. There are also there's a film festival, an international summit, which has been growing with some really important work that's being done in terms of equitable leadership in international contexts. SIG stands for Special Interest Group, and there are AERA/UCEA SIGs, and you'll have meetings. Most of those SIG meetings are at 7 in the morning, so you'll want to make sure you check on that. And then there's always a fireside chat that's sponsored by the Jackson Scholar Network, as well as a mentoring session for the Graduate Student Council. So if you're accustomed to going to conferences that have a session in the morning and then a lunch break and then a session in the afternoon, this is not your, it's a different kind of conference. It's an annual meeting and it's power packed, and you will come back with so many more questions than you had even when you went. So let's take a look at a couple of the different types of sessions. So you may be familiar with Ignite sessions. In an Ignite, it's a 5-minute presentation with 20 slides. TED Talks are kind of a variation on Ignite sessions. They're very compact and nobody's reading from any slides, which shouldn't happen anywhere anyway. But there's a discussant in the group of Ignites that are brought together, and that discussant will give an overview and promote conversation among not only the participants who are giving the Ignite session, the Ignite presentations, but also the audience. And the discussant will tell you, we'll monitor time so that there's an equitable opportunity for people to have conversation with each other. The paper sessions, pardon me, are a more traditional format, and a format with which you may be familiar, where the authors of papers are going to discuss research studies that they've done, including all the components of the study. As you go through the program, as Dr. Mackey was suggesting, it's also, I think it's important to find presentations being done that include methodologies that are of interest to you, for example, to see what somebody else's methodology looks like, or a research design, and whether you know that person or not, I think it's really important to take a look at those other methods. You also can email people if you aren't able to get to 12 sessions that are all at the same time. Because the participants are listed, you can email them at their home institution and request a copy of their paper, and they're usually delighted to send that to you. In that paper session, the authors make their presentations and are given X number of minutes based on how many participants there are. Then the discussant sort of compares and contrasts them, finds common threads that run through them, and then engages the audience as well. So the intent is that the audience gets a significant amount of time to ask authors questions, maybe make suggestions as well. And they go in the order that you see on the program. In roundtable sessions, the purpose is to have a lot of interaction. So once upon a time, people thought that the best way to present information at a conference was a paper. And we know that that's no longer the case. A paper session has less interaction certainly than a roundtable. So there are a number of tables set up in a room. There are a number of people at the table, perhaps 8 or 10 people, all presenting at the table, and there's a facilitator. You don't have an opportunity to project anything because there's no screen. So if there are slides that you want to show, you'll do that on your device that you have with you. But you will give all the components of your study as you describe what was accepted. Then the discussant will, similar to the paper session, the discussant will find the thematic commonalities across the various presentations, maybe offer some critique as well, and then facilitate a conversation with the participants. And much of that depends on how many people are involved at the roundtable. At all of these places it's a great opportunity to have your business card. And as you hear someone make a presentation, you go to them afterwards, introduce yourself, hand them your card, compliment them on something that was particularly resonant for you, and then ask for theirs as well. And you can continue a dialogue either then, or ask if there's some time that you could get together, or do it online when you get back. Critical conversations are somewhat unique to UCEA, and they're a powerful opportunity to bring a lively conversation, a lively discussion, using some probes or provocative questions around a specific topic. The person who submitted this session typically brings various people together and organizes it, and then chairs that session as well. So we have one on Friday afternoon, or Friday at 11 o'clock, I think. That's a special session. It is a critical conversation about equity in rural contexts. And we're bringing the people together who are engaged in a rural network improvement community, as an example.
Yeah, Christina, I forgot to mention before, like all the SIGs are at 7 in the morning, but then like the Indigenous Scholars and Scholarship SIG is at 1 o'clock, I believe, on Friday or something like that. So if you're interested in topic areas or critical conversation topics, sometimes those get placed in a little bit random places on the schedule. And so that's why it's good to go through all of it first. And Christine, I like to caution students with critical conversations, they do get very lively at times. And it's not a place where being a know-it-all is advantageous, right, to anybody, because they're critical conversations where we can all learn from one another. So I always encourage students, when you go into them, you bring with you an expertise, you bring with you experience, you bring your lived experiences into it, but we also want to remind everyone to be open to other people's ideas, because then the critical conversations accomplish their goals in a far more remarkable way when we're talking with one another and we don't have people trying to dominate. So oftentimes I see somebody will decide that it's a passionate area for them, and then it ends up being dominated by 1 or 2 people rather than having a good conversation amongst all the attendees.
Thank you, Holly. That's a great suggestion. It's much better to be known by people at UCEA, somebody who asks a great question and is a good listener, than somebody who comes in with lots of answers. So thanks for that. There are fewer symposia, but they're arranged around particular problems of practice or issues or research problems, and much like the the last group, the critical conversations, the organizer chairs the session and facilitates as well. Typically the participants in the symposium will have hard copies of their contribution, their presentation available. In all of these sessions, you'll be able to get electronic access to the research that people are discussing if you just request it. And we used to have chairs as well as discussants. And now we're streamlined and we have facilitator discussants, which is really great because it makes things run much smoother. So the facilitator discussant has read all of the papers of any of these sessions that we just described prior to the session. And they come prepared to be able to discuss them, to make recommendations, to ask if perhaps the author has considered something or other. It's not it's criticism in the best way. It's critical friend criticism. It's to help make the papers or the research the best it can be. So they'll announce the title of the session and give an overview. I'm sorry. And then they'll introduce the speakers, and they're very careful about time. So the amount of time in the session divided by the number of presenters with time added for interaction with the audience makes for a pretty tight time schedule. And they'll be the enforcers of that.
Right, and oftentimes working out ahead of time, like, are you going to give me a 3-minute warning, a 1-minute warning? Everybody, I mean, they kind of get the general idea, but they might do it differently. I always give people like 5-minute, 3-minute, 1-minute when I'm facilitating a session. But then you have to stop. And this is one of the things that when Christine and I were in grad school, right? Everybody, you learn this very quickly because it's rude to continue talking when you have other people who have presentations because you're taking time from them and communicating that your research is more important or your voice is more important in the session. So we always remind students that when they say 7 minutes, even if you are in the middle of a sentence, stop talking. And so by having someone give you a 1-minute warning, you can figure out how to wrap up your session in a way that doesn't seem abrupt. But even taking a minute, right? If there are 5 paper sessions and each person takes an extra minute, that's 5 minutes that is taken away from the discussion afterwards with the audience interaction. Or in some cases, I've been in sessions where people just kept talking and I ended up not even being able to present my paper because there was no time left. So you don't want to be responsible for diminishing other people's work. And certainly we hope that it's a reciprocal attitude where they also do not want to be responsible for diminishing the work. And we can go to the next slide, Danny. Okay, so as he's getting us over to our next slide, we wanted to talk about collaboration and mentoring. Let me pull up that slide. So it's really fostering sustainable networks, because oftentimes, well, thank you, Dan. So oftentimes, people get really excited or interested about areas of work that may be somewhat unfamiliar to them, or ways that other people's work connects with their work in unique ways that might allow for some good collaboration down the road. And so we just had a couple of words of advice here before we talk about collaborating more specifically. But one of the things I always recommend is, introduce yourself. Like if you're in a session and you're about to ask a question, just say your name and where you're from, like you're a graduate student at NDSU. And I had a question about your methodology, or just, however you want to do that. But if anybody who's familiar with me, from Jackson Scholars knows that if you come up to me in the hallway, I'm probably going to say, let's walk and talk, because I have to get to the next place I'm supposed to be. But I'm very, very interested in talking with you as well. So be prepared. Oftentimes, if people are in a hurry, that you have to walk and talk, and people will invariably get interrupted. That isn't anything about you. It doesn't mean that the person doesn't want to talk to you any longer. It's just the nature of the game, right? A lot of people want to connect with a lot of people. And then asking faculty that you know to introduce you to other faculty if you are unsure how to approach somebody is something that you can also do. We always tell graduate students, if you need introduced to somebody, ask me. I'll do it. If you're uncomfortable, Danny can also connect you with somebody if you needed that, or Angel Nash or Lisa Bass, the other associate director for Jackson Scholars, because we know that it can be somewhat uncomfortable to just walk up to somebody cold if you've not met them before. But universally, the faculty that are at UCEA are approachable, they're friendly, and they want to help graduate students. So if you aren't approaching them, they're never going to know that you want to talk to them. But having said that, we also encourage you to pay attention to the context clues in and around a faculty member. So if they're throwing their stuff in a bag and running to get out the door, probably not the best time, right, to engage them in conversation, or if they're already talking with somebody else. And you can tell that it's a very specific conversation. Or, one of the things I get a lot is, I took myself off in a corner when I'm about to present for about an hour beforehand to get myself centered with what I'm going to be doing. So when I see people who have their laptops open very intentionally and they're sitting by themselves, I don't approach those people, because usually they're doing something that they need to get done and they're on a time limit. So don't just stare at them from across the room and hope that they're going to get your message. It's kind of funny, but it happens a lot. And don't assume that somebody knows that you want to meet them or talk with them. So, if you were in the elevator and you didn't make it very specific that you wanted to try to catch up later, don't assume that because you were speaking with them, that they know that you might want to talk at greater length with them later. So being proactive is good. Being aggressive is never good. And so if you need help, your faculty within your program can introduce you to people. Any of the people working at the UCEA desk can kind of point you in the right direction, or everyone who has my cell phone number, they can text me and we can meet up. So don't be shy, particularly with the faculty who are responsible for a lot of the mentoring in UCEA, because any of the Jackson Scholar mentors, anybody with the mentoring, we find this is a very important part of our work, and we do it because it's important to us. And most of us have had really good mentors. So we want to pass that on to others.
May I interrupt for just a minute and add something, Holly? I met Holly when she was a grad student, and she approached me as a faculty member. And we continue to have a wonderful collaborative relationship moving forward. So we're living proof that this can happen.
Right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. And actually, Dr. Hisbel somebody recommended that I reach out to her first, or else I wouldn't have known. I didn't even know her prior to reaching out to her. So, and it has been like 11 years now. So connecting with other doctoral students is also super, super important. And I know that Christina can attest to this, because she works with students as a mentor far more than I do, where, I now kind of overarchingly, we have like 96. But the graduate student sessions, whether you're involved with Graduate Student Council or not, are designed for you. And the Graduate Student Council is always interested in hearing what you might want, what you want to see at conferences. And so these are really good sessions. And just introduce yourself to one another, because I remember as a doc student, I thought I was just kind of weird that, I didn't want to just go talk to people. And I realized everybody's standing around acting kind of weird and not introducing themselves. So once you do that, then it's a lot easier. With caution, I say about the networking sessions, there are so many sessions now, it seems, at UCEA for networking and new faculty or how to get a job or tenure and promotion. And I see far fewer people really focusing in on the papers, the symposium, and the panels that are research-based. I would also encourage you to divide your time well, because networking sessions are easy to attend and you feel like you're doing something, but the purpose is really to gain a deeper understanding of the current state of research in the field. And you need to go to research sessions, and you need to go to sessions that are outside perhaps even what you study, so you can see how all of it is interconnected, so you don't get stuck into a silo and you don't realize how everybody's work connects. And then my last one, this is the Rosa comment. Rosa Rivera-McCutcheon is a super phenomenal colleague of ours, and her first UCEA, she just went on a whim. She was by herself, didn't know anybody, and that's how she and I met. And again, we work very closely together now. I believe I was a second year faculty member. Invite people to your group, right? Invite them to hang with you, or if you're going to lunch, right, just even offer it out there, because it can be a very lonely space if you don't have a support network or you don't already know people. And so our goal is to really, from the graduate student stage up, helping people get in the habit of being very inclusive and inviting more people to the table, rather than creating the conditions where people feel like they're an outsider or they don't belong. Because all of our work matters to the field, and we won't know what other people are doing or how awesome they are if we never talk to them. Go ahead to the next slide.
As we're moving to the next slide, I want to add that it's not uncommon to find a group of 15 or 20 people gathered, and at the center of that posse is Dr. Holly Mackey holding court. And sharing and listening and asking and learning together. She has a wonderful way of engaging people and really making graduate students feel welcome. So yeah, that does happen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, if you see me anywhere and we're a group, you're welcome to join. No questions asked, just, say, hey, so I can introduce you if you don't know people. Because that's, you get a lot of good work done that way. Collaborating though, right? Collaborating is always exciting, right? And people will ask you like, oh, do you want to work on this project with me? Blah, 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 right? All these things. Like we're doing a Jackson Scholar book right now. And so it can be difficult, right? That there's tricky aspects of collaboration that particularly as graduate students, you need to think about. If you want to be a research faculty at a Research One institution and you have a lot of people asking you if you want to work on book chapters with them, that's probably not the best use of your time. Whereas, if somebody's asking you to collaborate on a project resulting in journal articles, then that would be a better use of your time. So with that, collaboration is really a two-way street, and oftentimes it's difficult to get a good understanding of what somebody means when they say they want to collaborate. So make sure that you know the person, or you know them well enough, or you've worked with them, or you know someone who's worked with them, that they're all people that you can work with, that your work patterns align, that you're not going to be stuck doing all of the work and then end up being sixth author on the article. Because there isn't a single definition for this, but to really set the parameters early. So if somebody says, hey, do you want to be a special issue editor with us on this? For example, we have a special issue that we're going to start working on, Susan Faircloth and I, and our goal is to then have a young Native scholar, because it's focused on Indian education, work with us, because we want to mentor them into the process of how do you actually do this. So it's a guided collaboration, and the purpose of that really is to help teach people who've not done it before how to do it, so then they can do that on their own. And so through that, right, when we get to that point in the special issue planning, we have to think really creatively and get like who's all out there and what's our relationship with those people, and so you want to make sure that you are supporting everybody, but then there's work that just has to get done. And so, like for me, book projects are far less meaningful than research articles when I'm working with grad students, because I know that they need research articles to get jobs, and that's our goal. We want them to be able to get positions that they want, whether that's at a teaching institution, a research institution, community education setting, whatever it might be. But you might engage with collaboration on research or writing or creative projects. The Indigenous Scholars and Scholarship SIG is just a UCEA SIG that all of us got together, people who both do work, Native scholars who do work in Indian education, and non-Native scholars who either are or would like to do more work with Native communities. We just formed it to get together so we could think about different things that we could do with one another and support one another. But you need to be clear what type of collaboration you're getting into, because you don't have all the time in the world. And then you want to think about the fact that it is reciprocal. So if somebody's asking you to collaborate and you think because they're a senior person, they're going to carry all of the weight and do all of it, that's not a good idea then for you to get into that. And oftentimes that happens with collaborating, and we're all guilty of it. So if you've made a mistake, right, we all have, or if you enter into something, you have to know when to say you're pulling out, right? So something is just getting developed and it looks like it's going to be more than you can handle, then you know what your limits are. And we want to make sure that everybody's bringing something, right? So you don't want to just ride the coattails of somebody else who's doing really good work, because you're doing your own work and your work's probably pretty cool. And if your work's pretty cool and their work's pretty cool, just think how cool it is if you're putting those two pieces together, but then recognizing that they have to fit. A lot of times people try to push different ideas together that don't necessarily fit. And I find that usually has a lot to do with people not really being immersed in the literature and understanding their topics as well as they should before they decide to collaborate. So make sure you know your topic deeply before you start to collaborate, because then it has a better success there, better chance of success. But Christine and I really, when we were planning this before, we just thought, like, here are the if you're going to collaborate, whether it's with another doctoral student, whether it's with faculty at your university, another university, whatever, right, is asking if you have the time necessary to devote to the collaboration, or do you have the skills, right? Do you have the passion? Can you follow through with it, or is there a huge learning curve for you? And then are you contributing in a meaningful way? Because there are other ways to get involved at UCEA and with UCEA faculty. There's like fellowships through the different UCEA centers. There are projects that are going on through all of those centers that you can also gain some experience and collaborate there. So if you don't have the time to be a lead on a project or a co-lead, or this isn't something that is so exciting to you that you'll make the time, then you need to think about collaborating differently, and maybe collaborating later, or collaborating, being a part of something, but making it clear that you can't take a lead.
Just wanted to let you know.
Did you want to add anything before? Go ahead.
I was just going to say we have about 22 minutes, and we're doing really good on time.
Thank you.
Thanks for that,
Next
Dan.
slide.
No, we'll go to the next slide. It'd be great. Thank you. As you can imagine, we could spend an hour on each one of these slides. So we're compacting it, and we are going to save some time at the end for questions. So collaboration, as Dr. Mackey explained, has all kinds of different components. And one of the things that I'd also encourage you to look for are research practice partnerships. So you're going to be looking for university faculty. You're going to be looking for other graduate students who share your common research interest. But you also may find at UCEA, increasingly at UCEA, you may find practitioners. And if you're interested in research practice partnerships, then I would encourage you to consider getting in touch with them as well. So networks are only healthy when they're sustainable, and you don't want to be the linchpin on the network. So as the slide suggests, it's about finding your people. And your people are not people who are just like you. They're people who stretch you. And make you consider things that you hadn't thought of through, a different set of lenses. So I tell my doc students about, I try to engage them in Twitter, and they always look at me a little funny initially. And then Fernando Branch is on this meeting today, and he's actually a doctoral student here at the University of Denver. And he is a great person to follow on Twitter. He tweets out of class and sends pictures and quotes. And I tell students to think of 5 people that you'd love to just sit and have dinner with. 5 scholars, 5 writers, 5 leaders, and follow them on Twitter. So your building a network is no different than that. You want to go to sessions where you're going to learn from people. You don't want to go as a cheerleader to just say, I already knew that, because there's so many things that happen at UCEA that are about expanding our worldview. So finding those people who are doing interesting work to you, and then introducing yourself to them, and not being shy about that. So there's a construct called interstitial space. That's a biological idea of that matter that's in between cells that hold cells together. And we want you to look for the interstitial, excuse me, pardon me, the interstitial space between your work and other people's work. Increasingly, I think people are looking at interdisciplinary work. And so being able to look at collaboration that isn't along exactly the same topic, but a related topic, or a way that you see it connected through any of the sessions that you attend, is always a good suggestion. Networking is probably the most important skill. It's one of the most important human skills that there is. And so connecting and connecting and connecting. Not only are you going to want to give your business card and collect the business cards from people with whom you talk, but then you're going to want to act on them. And I mentioned this earlier, you're going to want to jot a few notes to yourself on the back of the card so that you can remember at the time you're having the conversation, you're deeply engaged in it. And then as you walk away, a new conversation begins and it's easy to forget it. So Sunday on the plane on the way home, or Monday, you want to send a note off to them. I just returned on this past Sunday from a week of conferences. I was in 2 back-to-back annual meetings. And by Monday night, I had 11 emails from people who were following up, which I was really impressed with. So you want to keep track of those folks. So you also, it's a great idea to look for sessions that are not just purely aligned with what you think your current research interest is. The more you do your research, the more you find connections to other contexts. So look for those connections across interdisciplinary lines. So when you write that note, it's nice to say it was great to meet you, blah, 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 but it's also great to make some short-term or long-term plans. So following Dr. Mackey's suggestions about writing together, maybe there's something that you can write about the graduate student experience. That's certainly something to consider. About the Jackson Scholar experience. Maybe it's about your research. Maybe it's about the research practice partnership. This doesn't have to be a dissertation. But maybe you're going to plan on what you want to submit to UCEA for next year. That'll be due, those proposals are always due in May. Maybe you and a group of people can plan it right on the spot while you're there or shortly after you return, and think about what you would do in the interim, what kind of study you'd be conducting, and then you'll come back and report on it at the 2020 conference, which I believe is in Puerto Rico. Is that right, Dr. Mackey?
Yes.
Okay, so that goes to the idea of laying the groundwork for collaborative projects. And for those people who go to AERA as well, and Jackson Scholars attend both UCEA and AERA, which is in April, it's another good touch point to see what you've accomplished in between those two and how you're doing. If you're a Jackson Scholar, our hope is that you've been in touch with your Jackson Scholar mentor, more than just once in between there. Your Jackson Scholar mentor is deeply involved in so many things, including mentoring lots of people. And so if she or he doesn't reach out to you, it's absolutely on you to drop a note and just kind of update your mentor on what you're doing, ask any questions. If there's something that you've written that you'd like them to review before you submit it, feel free to do that. So day planners, the bullet point on the slide says make your planner work for you. Actually writing it in and scheduling specific appointments with yourself for when you're going to do these follow-ups is a very, it's a very useful plan. I also would like to commend Danny, who's on the line with us from UCEA, for sending out the piece on a Google Doc yesterday with all the Jackson Scholar Network related activities for the whole conference. So that's kind of your skeleton. And then from there, you're going to add flesh to the bones with all the other sessions that you want to go to. It almost needs to be three-dimensional because so many of them happen at the same time. So then sometimes I do it in different colors or whatever works for you in a day planner sort of model, so that for the sessions you know you can't go to, you can write in advance to the scholars who are presenting or whatever that might be. But you know that when you get back home following a conference, you hit the ground running and you get back into your other routines. So if you don't schedule it, chances are you may not, you may let that go, and it's important to follow up on that.
Right. And we have our next slide is about building research networks. And I'm going to leave it up for just a minute, but we're going to then move quickly over to the mentoring slide because we do want to make sure we have some time. And actually, you know what, we can, Danny, can you move that slide?
This the one you want?
No, the next one. Right. So just taking good notes and even discussion notes, and if you have a mentor, take notes there. That'll help you build your research networks. But we did want to give Danny a few minutes here to talk about just some advice from experience as a graduate student at UCEA. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then when Danny's done, we have a mentoring slide for you. No, go back, Danny.
Sorry, there seems to be like a little bit of a lag with the internet.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so go back to the experience slide, and then as we can take questions with the mentor slide up.
Okay, yeah, the advice slide is up. I just think it's just taking a while to show up for you.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead and say what you'd like to on this one.
Okay, well, I like what you added to the slide already, but I did want to say, wear comfortable shoes. I think these are long days at convention, and if you wear a good, comfortable pair of shoes, it's going to make a big difference. And I know you want to look good, and that's fine, but try to find that balance. And I'm a terribly shy person. I mean, painfully shy. So you have to try to fight that urge to be a wallflower if that's your nature. And as Dr. Mackey mentioned earlier, you know how you can invite someone into your group. You can also join a group. Find a small group to join. Ask if it's okay, can I tag along? And that will kind of help you in that transition and get you out of like your comfort zone. But yeah, other than that, you know, just go to convention, have kind of a plan ready. Try to follow the plan as much as you can, make connections, and then, you know, follow up.
Yeah, and keep your tennis shoes with you. If you have a small pair in case someone's like, oh, let's go to dinner, and you're in your 4-inch stilettos because you just presented, you don't want to walk across the quarter in those. So speaking from experience there. So we're going to put up the mentoring slide, but we only have a few minutes left, so you can read those while we are taking questions that have been submitted in advance, or if any have gone into the chat box there. And if Danny, if you want to.
Okay, I do have a few questions for you. I'm going to start with one. It's a post-convention one. Dr. Hesbold talked about the follow-up emails and making your calendar kind of work for you. But what other ways can you ensure that you retain what you've gained and that you keep that momentum going from convention?
That's a good question. Christina?
I'll jump in. I'm a really serious calendar person. So I will put notes to myself 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks out, just to continue to the flow, because it's really easy to have other flows take over. And particularly for collaboratively planned projects, somebody needs to be the organizer to arrange for Zoom meetings or whatever it might be. So just the same way you do with your own research when you're working on your coursework or when you're working on your dissertation, calendarizing things really works for me. And if you fall from grace and you don't make that 4-week meeting with yourself, then reschedule another one right away.
Yeah, I think that's important. And then, asking people for their papers. So then, they're going to email them to you as time progresses, or just looking up the work of the people that you met or that interested you when they were talking about their work. I usually come up with a list of people who I didn't know what they were working on because, we've been doing this a minute now, so it changes over time. I don't like journaling, particularly reflective journaling. I still do it because it helps me write, but it also helps me capture my ideas at the time so then I can go back and read them and remember why I was excited about it, and then it stirs that desire to know more.
I have a couple more questions for you. This one is seeking advice on how to address, let's say, a disagreement between yourself and your mentor.
At the conference or in general?
Just like in the work with your mentor, you might not agree perhaps with some advice or kind of the way the mentor is trying to, guide you along your path. Like, what is the best way to address that?
Well, I think that there's always time to be gracious and say, thank you, I'll take that into consideration. But there's also a time to advocate for yourself if you're not being heard. And that can be difficult. I think it can be very, very difficult because you don't want to be perceived as being combative or argumentative. But oftentimes I always think about when I'm getting feedback that just doesn't align with anything I'm doing and I don't know where it's coming from. I think about how I communicated the work I was doing in the first place. And often I'll say, I'm sorry, maybe there's a misunderstanding. Let me share this again. Here's what I need. Right? And so when I have mentees who they want to talk through conceptual or theoretical frameworks, that's a really big discussion. And a lot of that is personal, right? So having a conversation in a way that takes those things into account is different than methodology, where if somebody wants to talk to me about methodology and they're coming at me as I'm a qualitative researcher, my first question is going to be, are you? Okay. Or do you just not want to do statistical analysis, or do you just not feel comfortable with statistical analysis because the questions you want to ask require statistical analysis? So perhaps, guiding mentees into thinking about their strengths differently and that they have the ability to do what they need to do. They just might need to think about supplementing their methodological knowledge. But sometimes people are just so far off base and they're not listening to each other and they're not communicating well, and then it gets more tense and it tends to build over time that, sometimes it's okay to fire a mentor, right? And just, thank you so much for your feedback and walk away. And if it's your Jackson Scholar assigned mentor, you can always contact us and we can try to navigate through what that might be. But we're, as faculty, we're all very committed, but we also have life happen to us in the same way that life happens to you. And, checks don't arrive when they're supposed to, or flights are canceled, or we have deaths in our family, or we're watching, loved ones go through really challenging things. We have faculty who are raising their grandkids because they're trying to help their own children with their own needs. And so I think reminding yourself that we're all human, and sometimes just addressing perhaps miscommunication works, which is not to diminish the fact that some people are just awful mentors. And I don't even know, they probably don't want to be. I have been an awful mentor to one of my Jackson Scholars without knowing that I was not good at it, because I really had to learn what it means to be a mentor when I first started. So knowing that and just extending grace, I think, helps, but knowing when to walk away is also important.
I'd like to add too that being a Jackson Scholar mentor is sort of a delicate balance. It's a sometimes precarious dance, because ultimately the chair of your dissertation is the person who's going to be approving or not approving your dissertation or your doctoral research project. Excuse me.
Yeah, so I don't say like Dr. Mitchell said I should do this.
Yeah, so while your Jackson Scholar mentor is another set of eyes, it's another set of lenses. But I'd be careful that you use your mentor, you rely on a mentor to be a critical friend, but you also have great ideas, or you wouldn't be a Jackson Scholar, or you wouldn't be a doctoral student. And so you have to be ultimately the arbiter of all the advice you're getting and what you believe in your heart is the right thing to do. You can always say things like, I understand your position, or thank you for sharing, before it gets to a point that you have to fire somebody.
Right. And I would add to this one, just going to the slide, because if we do run out of time, make sure that you know what you want to talk about when you're setting up times to meet with your mentors. And if you need feedback on anything written, get it to them a couple weeks in advance. I know for me, it's very helpful when I know the purpose of the meeting, first and foremost. So if you just want to brainstorm, I can do that. If you want feedback on your writing and you hand it to me as we meet, then you've wasted my entire time, because I can't provide feedback to you while we're sitting there talking because I haven't yet read it. So making sure that, sometimes when these conflicts arise, they're always two-sided. And the expectation is that we would have better communication, and that's why we're doing some of these webinars. That's where they came about completely, was filling in the gaps and then helping both mentors and mentees have a better understanding of what we're trying to do with the graduate student development at UCEA.
And don't forget that the other graduate students that you're going to be meeting at a place like UCEA, also in a sort of parallel sort of way, can be really good mentors as well. Their program may not be just like yours, it likely won't be just like yours, but they're experiencing some of the same challenges and supports that you are. So I think that there are colleagues who are great mentors as well.
Final question before we wrap up. One self-care tip for convention and or life in general.
Sleep. Yeah, don't stay up late and get up early. So you can go at UCEA from 7 in the morning until midnight every night, and you'll be burnt out and you won't retain anything. And that's for conference and for life. Make sure that you are resting. Even though it's super fun to stay out and hang out with people, like, rest.
I wrote a chapter of a book called Juggling Flaming Chainsaws once upon a time that talked about the lack of work-life balance. And while Dr. Mackey's recommendation is an excellent one, I haven't figured out a way to do that at UCEA because it's so rich and there's so many opportunities. And I'm really careful about what I map out about what I want to attend and participate in, but I really max it and then I rest when I get back home.
Yeah, I can't do that. You would not want to be around me if I didn't sleep. But, and not being disappointed. I think an interesting part of self-care is not letting your own expectations defeat you. So, for example, Dr. Oswald and I made plans every conference to get together. And I think we've gotten together once in the last couple of years, which is fine for us because we see each other outside of it. We intentionally make time to work outside and go see each other outside of conference time. But knowing you can't do it all, I think, is really, really smart. It's a smart thing to keep in mind because you can get burnt out. And then making sure that you also bear in mind, whatever you need to do is going to be beneficial because you are on the job market from the moment you step foot off the plane, and sometimes while you're on the plane because you don't know who you're sitting with, all the way through the end of the conference. So everything you're doing, people are watching and people are seeing what you're capable of. So you want to make sure whatever it is you need to do, whether that's sleep, whether I bring my own food because I can't eat restaurant food for days and feel good. If it's wearing ugly shoes, right, with the cutest outfit, that works too. Danny's advice there was smart. Just knowing what you need and knowing how to remove yourself if you need to go take care of yourself, or even having a group where you're all like, okay, so we have to present in the morning, we're going to bed at 9, whatever that looks like for you. I've never done that. But it's important to network. It's important to know what your limits are because some people have far more narrow limits on to how much people time they can do.
Right. Well, I think that's going to pretty much sum it up for us. I'm going to just go ahead and wrap up and do a couple quick announcements before we say goodbye. First, thank you, Dr. Hesbold. Thank you, Dr. Mackey, for your time, for spending this hour with us. We really appreciate you. Their email is up you can see it right now on the screen. If you have any other questions or you want to clarify something, feel free to reach out to them. I wrote my email in the chat box. You can reach out to me at any time. It's literally my job. I'm at headquarters and I'm here to help you out. And if I can't figure something out for you, I can direct you in the right direction. I'm going to be at the registration desk for most of the time at convention. Feel free to walk up and ask me for anything that you might need. Okay. With that said, this actually ends our webinar series for the year. We usually run from January to October. So golden opportunity. If you have any ideas, you have some topics that you would love to see in our webinar series next year, send them to us. Our co-associate directors are in the planning phase and they love to hear from you and they want programming that is ideal for you and exactly what you would like to see. So send them our way. This webinar will be archived within 24 hours on the UCEA website. You can go back and listen to it again. You can send it to your friends. It's going to be there under the resources tab. Okay. I want to remind you there is a graduate student connections that goes out twice a month. I recommend that you open that and read it. We update it often. We have job opportunities in there. We have all sorts of tips and reminders and advice, and it's a very good read. I suggest you open it and take a look. And then that's about it. We're going to see you in New Orleans. We're looking forward to it. Follow us on Twitter at UCEA JSN. You can always contact us through there as well. Have a safe and happy Halloween, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, everyone.